Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Historical Humans podcast. My name is Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my fellow co-host, Colum Coleman. And today we are talking about something quite special that has popped up in the news, and it might be the reason why Aaron is not here with us today. What could that mystery be? Well, none other than Detective Agency Pinkertons. Dun,
That
dun,
is
dun.
not how those words go. That is not the order in which those words are put
You
at
can use them in
all.
any order.
Uh, Today's subject for you is a topical one and a historical one at the same time. We do love doing that here on this channel. It is the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. That is their official title, or at least it was when they were founded all the way back in 1850 by one man in particular, Alan Pinkerton. Now, Justin, I'd like to take a moment before going any further to remind you of some things that you have said on previous broadcasts of this show.
Oh
Uh,
no.
I believe specifically the last broadcast we had about what was that? The Cromwell Uprising. You spoke greatly of your Scottish pride. Well, today we're going to talk of your Scottish shame
Oh no.
as one as the man responsible for this company and thus its slew of rather, shall we say, colorful historical incidents is none other than Scottish immigrant Alan Pinkerton, who was born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1819.
So that just means he's British. Yeah, no, he'd be British. He was British. He wasn't
Scottish.
Scottish. He was
He's
British.
Scottish. No, he's Scottish because do you know why he emigrates?
Oh, why? Why did he emigrate?
Because in 1842, at the age of 23, he gets involved in extremist politics in the United Kingdom and is forced to leave.
God damn it, he actually is Scottish.
He's Scottish.
Oh, okay. I'll take that one. That's an L.
I have never been so happy to be from only one side of the Irish Sea.
Yeah, you just enjoy your Emerald Isle, okay? While us
Yeah,
Scots
that's
have
it.
to have to fight for our freedom.
Anyway, William Wallaceing aside, he moves to Chicago,
Hey,
which it's the 1830s, so he's about 100 years too soon for what he really wants to be. So instead of doing that, he becomes a barrel maker,
what did he want to
making,
be?
I don't know, what's 1930s and 40s Chicago known for?
Well, you see, there were quite a few criminal enterprises. Oh, he was trying to be a criminal. Oh.
Yeah. Uh, because as well, he's working as a barrel maker. Um, he decides one day that he's gonna go out to this little island as he's in the out the lands around Chicago, what is now known as Chicagoland, before it's all been urbanized and all that. He's gonna go out to this little islet, and he's gonna cut down a bunch of trees that he doesn't own, so that he can haul them back and make parts for his barrels himself, and not have to pay anyone and undercut the market.
Which, for the record, at this time, Chicago is little more than a fort and surrounding like inhabitation. It's a small
Yeah,
settlement. It's not a city by any means.
yeah. Uh, it's the one of the bigger things here, but it's not
Probably
big.
15 or 20,000 people, which was a lot for the time.
Yeah. Yes. I like to imagine there's no zeros after that 15. It's like there's either 15 people or there was 20,000. You choose.
There's exactly 16 people.
Yeah. Yeah, somewhere in that range.
One of them is Alan Pinkerton.
Yeah. Yeah. While he's doing this, while he's doing this, he comes across people performing a much more profitable criminal enterprise as he discovers the island has an encampment on it, presently unoccupied but clearly in use. for the counterfeiting of money. Now,
Ooh.
Alan sees a pretty good business deal in this, so he immediately decides to run back to Chicago, tell the sheriff, come back to this place and arrest all the counterfeiters. And in so doing, he makes himself a celebrity.
Hmm. Not
Um,
only that, but on top of him getting this celebrity figure, the police turn right around and go, "Hey, would you
yep,
like a job?"
yep. And the reason for that was counterfeiting was one of the most common and most difficult to stop crimes in the United States at this time. Uh, it is prevalent. The United States is mostly a frontier nation, which means there's a lot of places where there are people and not law enforcement.
Oh, the manifest
Which,
destiny.
yeah, we don't talk about that part. Anyway,
Colonialism.
following his deputy sheriff's post in the Cook County uh, Police Department, he then decides to move up to distribution as he begins working as a special agent for the post office. Now, what this means is he's not your mailman. He's the guy investigating mail fraud. Also a common crime in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s.
Which to just to put it in like to emphasize the point a little bit more too. The post office at this point is one of the most vital things in America because they don't have phones. I mean, at this point, telegraph is barely kicking off the ground, so to get a message from point A to point B takes a lot. So the post office was really important. And also, fun fact for you, Colum, did you know that the Postmaster General is the highest paying job in the United States federal employment system?
Yeah, that sounds like Ben Franklin cutting out a good slice of things for himself. Let's be honest, the man was a genius and he started the post office. Another reason why the post office is so essential at this time is because, like we said before with the Manifest Destiny, America is a frontier state, which means there is no infrastructure. So the post office has to connect all these tiny little settlements that might not even be on any map to each other at all times with no roads.
And also around this time, 1850s, was around the time of the California Gold Rush. So you have an entire segment of the population across an entire continent that is sparsely populated, which is where we get the Pony Express. Another potential podcast topic for a future season.
Yes, yes, yes. However, we're not here to talk about the post system or how it may have saved Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street among its many other
It is
wonderful
important, and the fact that he got a job in this important position should emphasize how important it was for him to get this job. That was the whole point of that tangent.
Yeah, it should emphasize. Empathizing, however, the showing of empathy will not be occurring for much of the rest of this podcast.
So wait, before we go on, I do want to use our little analogy from off camera when we were discussing this about what it would be like to stop a crime and then be offered a job.
I don't want to go back to that, mostly because I can't remember what we've been talking about trying to prep for this.
We talked about a modern day equivalent of this, especially within the city of Chicago, is you're in the middle of stealing a car when you witness a certain act of violence that is very prevalent in the city of Chicago. So you call that in, and then the police turn around and offer you a job.
Yeah, you witness an intentional unaliving, I believe, is the YouTube-friendly term.
Yes, exactly. So, keeping it modern day.
Intention, yeah. But yeah, and all this takes him up to with the fame, with these important positions, and the government connections that come with them. All of that takes him to founding the Pinkerton Detective Agency in 1850, wherein he becomes known as America's first private eye, because as the Pinkerton National Detective Agency here, he adopts the motto, "We never sleep," which starts off a chain reaction in media and in people's minds. By media, we mean like the one newspaper in all of Illinois at the time. Uh, that uh, basically starts this chain reaction referring to uh, private eyes as private eyes. It used to just be that you were hiring a private detective, and now it's called a private eye, and he gets known as America's first private eye because he's the first man to whom that title applies. Now, uh,
Only
I'm just
about
gonna go.
75 years after inception. It took
Yeah,
75 years before we got a private eye.
yeah. Now I'm gonna go forward a few years here to 1856. We're gonna talk about the one good thing he does with his life. Because in
It's got to be more than one.
1856, Alan Pinkerton proves himself to be an incredibly progressive and pragmatic businessman in the hiring of Kate Warren, the first female detective in history. Um, the reason for this is she was able to convince him that as a woman and as an intelligent person, she was capable of getting information out of places his agents couldn't. Um, Namely the wives of other of the criminals that they were investigating. As it turns out that Kate knew how to gossip with people and get people to talk and like her. The other way is the more obvious one, which is men do get lonely.
Yeah, very lonely.
It's basically a free entry into their house if you can convince them.
Yeah, and it doesn't take
Uh,
men very long to convince. Let's
yeah.
call it a stack. Like,
But
keep it
yeah.
honest.
So, but let's be honest. Let's be honest here too. Like, so this is the one good thing he does. He gives her a shot, and he refers to her as the best detective he ever hired because of how effective she proves.
Honestly, yeah, women are smart. Women are super intelligent,
Stop
smarter
pandering.
than pretty much any man.
Stop.
Let's just be.
Stop pandering. Stop
I'm not.
pandering. It sounds like we're pandering.
But no, seriously though, they are very. She was very intelligent, and she used it to her advantage, and she
Yep.
clearly realized and
Yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
understood the
Yeah.
downfalls of men and how
Yeah.
women could be taken advantage of in
Yeah.
terms of intelligence.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she was more than willing to perform the Cleopatra or the Elizabeth I, which is just straight up using the fact that that people will underestimate her because of her sexuality to absolutely dominate the playing field.
Hey, take it and run
Yeah,
with it. That's
it's
what I say. And good on Ellen for
yeah,
listening to her.
it's a handicap, but not for me. Breaks the third person, breaks the other guy's knee.
Oh my god. You know, there's got to be a couple of other good things Pinkerton has done. I mean,
Uh,
potentially saved a president's life.
well, we'll come to that in a second here as we're gonna move forward in time
Oh no.
to the next great thing that the Pinkertons do, and by great we mean important here.
Yeah.
As the Pinkertons are focusing on building their name, they're focusing on moving forward and getting a bigger piece of that pie to, try and dominate this private eye industry that they are more or less the poster child for. So in 1858, they participate in abolitionist activities,
Hey, that's actually a pretty
which
good
is
point.
which is actually good. Yes, this actually makes them a lot of friends, and it's pretty good. This is one of the other good things they do. The nice things are going to stop being talked about very shortly,
Oh
but
no.
we do need to bring them up, and this is the abolitionism, which is actually good. So oh, there's some questionable motives around this. Namely, Pinkerton kind of wanting to showboat and show off to people more than like actually trying to help. Uh, in particular, in the John Brown raid of Missouri homesteads in 1858, during which point a man named John Brown freed 11 slaves from basically two homesteads in Missouri. Everything's kind of in the name.
Which Missouri had legal slavery at this point.
Yeah, but Illinois did not. So John Brown gets them into Illinois, and his plan was to get them to Canada, where they would be out of bounds not only of United States law, but also out of the bounty hunters that Southern states would hire to come and abduct African Americans and Black people living in free states to use as slave labor.
And the messed up thing, as if that wasn't messed up enough, but they would also abduct legally freed slaves and enslave them from there and sell them back into the trade.
Yeah, that's why I didn't say slaves. I said Black people.
Yeah.
It was entirely indiscriminate.
The Fugitive Slave Act had a lot of provisions that gave way to a lot of negative acts. So yeah, part of it was sending a lot of the former slaves to Canada. And then also, kind of an underside to it is even a lot of abolitionists believed that they should be freed. However, they also weren't as keen to have former slaves living in their areas, which kind of helped the funnel.
Yeah, well, that will definitely lead into something that I believe we talk about in the start of July, which would be the nation of Liberia.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
So
that is actually coming up. That is one of our patriotic 4th of July type episodes for this year.
Yeah, talk about another nation that the United States tried to create.
Yeah, well, we did create it. It still exists. Anyway, John Brown intends to get these slaves to Canada where they will be safe, where even the bounty hunters can't get to them. However, John Brown doesn't have the money to bribe everyone to get them to Canada. So Alan Pinkerton, as his way of helping out, in exchange for basically taking credit for the raid, arranges for a $500 transport to get these people from Chicago to Detroit, up into Michigan, which at that point the distance from Missouri is enough to effectively by near indefinite time. Bounty hunters aren't going to push past Chicago and try and get into Detroit to hunt these specific people down.
Not to mention Detroit's literally across the river from Canada, so that was pretty much a golden ticket.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. It was a perfect setup because even if they were being pursued, the agents pursuing them would effectively be too lazy to go that far.
And they say there's no such thing as a perfect crime.
Yeah, and part of how Pinkerton took credit for this raid was he didn't pay $500 for these people to go to Detroit. He held a fundraiser.
Oh my God! So he didn't even pay the money himself.
He didn't pay the money. No. He held the Pinkerton Friends of the Jim Brown raid. 5K. For the cure extravaganza.
Oh no! He threw a gala.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, he threw a fucking gala for these people to get them to freedom. Which is where the questionable motive comes in, because at this point, the Pinkerton Detective Agency, well, not the name that it would become and presumably stay for the next 100+ years, it is still it's basically a monopoly in this part of the world.
Well, yeah, it's the first of its kind and probably one of the only of its kind still.
Yeah, so he's very dominant in what is frontier America, especially Lake States frontier. So he has $500 to throw at this problem. He just chooses to do this public thing so that he can get more business, raise support for.
He does the billionaire philanthropic idea of I'm hosting this fundraiser so we can raise all this money. Or even better, it's when you go.
It's that company that paid $80 million on a suit for ads to tell everyone how they donated $100,000.
Oh my God! Or I'm thinking it's the grocery stores that are donate to this cause, so then them as a corporation can write off all of the donations.
Yep.
Oh God.
Yeah, yeah.
We live in a
It's that
society.
bullshit. Yeah. We live in society, and so did Alan Pinkerton. As the bullshit escalates from this point forward,
This has got
as
to be
we
my
hit
favorite part.
one of America's, I think actually America's most fateful election, the 1860 election, which saw Abraham Lincoln become president-elect of the United States. Now, Abraham Lincoln at this time is living in Illinois. Illinois is known as the land of Lincoln, largely because he was the first and for a very long time the only president that we had put in office.
Not a huge amount of time. Ulysses S. Grant came 20 years later.
We don't talk about Grant.
People forget that Grant comes from Illinois.
Yeah, Grant does come from Illinois, but there's nothing good for second place. All right, Grant is Lincoln's shadow, and you know it. Lincoln made him.
Can you name the other two who came from Illinois? There's two more.
Well, I can name the last one.
The middle one is, I think, the most surprising. President Ronald Reagan was born and raised in Eureka, Illinois.
Yeah, let's not forget Barack Obama.
Well, yeah, that was the last one, Obama. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, the first, our first, it was the first one. This is the land of Lincoln. So Lincoln becomes president-elect. It's 1861, and Abraham Lincoln, as president-elect, has to get from Illinois, where he is, to Washington, D.C., where he will be sworn in as president of the United States. Between D.C. and Lincoln is the city of Baltimore. Now, Lincoln is doing a tour of all the wonderful towns and cities that, supported him and voted for him, big politician, waving handshakes.
His media tour.
Yeah. Yeah, for the time. The Pinkertons were hired to protect Abraham Lincoln during this trip, as the Pinkertons were the private security company in Illinois. So they were the logical choice to simply start there and just sort of move with him to the East Coast. However, the Pinkertons, they see an opportunity in protecting the president in the days before the Secret Service. Namely, that the city of Baltimore exists.
Oh, no, not Baltimore.
Now, Baltimore at this time is a relatively prosperous port. However, it's also one of the last stops on the tour, which makes it the perfect place for some drama, as the Pinkertons decided to claim that they had foiled an attempt on the life of the president-elect of the United States of America in what they would call the Baltimore plot. Now, supposedly, the Baltimore plot was when Abraham Lincoln gets off his train at its regularly scheduled stop at its regularly scheduled time in the city of Baltimore, armed gunmen will be waiting in the crowd to fire upon him. So, in response, the Pinkertons decide to do the following things, and it's freaking hilarious.
Okay.
Number 1. The Pinkertons decide to make sure to escort Lincoln safely to his inauguration. So, they have him board an earlier train than expected and skip his stop in Baltimore. This is not good for Lincoln, as it leads to accusations of him being a coward for not, stepping in front of a bunch of men with guns who want to shoot him.
Bold take, Cotton. Which, the interesting thing is, Lincoln also had a bit of notoriety around it because he had been challenged to a number of duels, of which one of the times is quite interesting because when you would get challenged to a duel, you could choose the weapon. And one of his options was cow dung.
He's going to beat you to death with that. Yeah.
Well, so it worked because it was just psychological. His opponent ended up backing down, so by default, Lincoln won.
Yeah. The man had away with it. All right. Number 2, second step in the Pinkertons' master plan. You remember Kate Warren from earlier? Well, she's back again.
Okay.
Kate Warren is going to board this train with Abraham Lincoln, but she will not board with the president-elect of the United States. Instead, she will board with her invalid brother. So Lincoln is dressed as an invalid. And For
Lincoln
those
was
of
six
you
foot
who
four.
don't know, this is a person who is very sick. This is effectively what they used to call someone with a physical or mental disability. Um, so, yeah, second part of the plan, that
Lincoln was 6'4".
and a former like was it boxer or
Wrestler.
wrestler? He's a former like undefeated wrestling
He was a
champion, right?
wrestler. He was 6'4". He was also a frontiersman who built who built
Yeah,
a house. Like,
yeah,
this was a
yeah.
man who
This,
was very
yeah,
well, like,
th-
muscle and
yeah,
like
yeah.
brawn and just.
Yeah, yeah. But so that's step two of the plot. Step three. Step three. Um, vandalize government property as the Pinkertons proceed to cut every telegraph line leading into Baltimore,
Now, why would they do that?
so that the conspirators can't get a message to Baltimore informing them that the president's plans have been changed.
Okay, so how did they uncover this plot? Did they capture the conspirators that are so clever?
Nope, no one was ever arrested or charged or implicated with the plot in any way. It disappeared almost as soon as Abraham Lincoln passed Baltimore.
Oh my god.
Um, which, and of course, Alan Pinkerton, as a private security service, refused to reveal his sources for fear of endangering potential agents and other such things, and thus, well, people kind of think it happened. There's plenty of evidence for what was otherwise an efficient organization having absolutely nothing to say they made it up. They
Now,
fabricated an assassination attempt on the president elect of the United States.
what could have possibly what benefit could that have possibly had? I mean, it's not like they
Well,
would gain favor with the
well
president or be
they
used in
don't just
times
gain
of need.
they don't just gain favor of the president. They're national heroes. All right, these are American patriots, patrioting for the most patriotic country that ever did. All right, they saved your president.
Oh my god. They didn't do a
They
very good job a few years later.
Oh, that's because they're off doing a different job. Because as everyone presumably knows here, Abraham Lincoln gets sworn in, and about half the states decide that, you know what, we didn't vote for you, therefore we don't have to listen to you, and proceeded to start what is a little thing known as the U.S. Civil War.
Hashtag not my
Um,
president.
yeah, uh, which was an absolute shit show from beginning to end in every theater.
Which it was a war over slavery, as was
Yeah.
clearly stated in every single state's secession documents. It
Yep.
was not a war over states' rights.
And I would also like to point out that it was the Confederacy that fired the first shot when they attempted to gun down Union soldiers for daring to leave a fortress with their own military equipment.
Fort Sumter, South
Yep.
Carolina. The shot heard round the world.
Yeah, because, how dare these Union soldiers think they get to keep the Union rifles and Union artillery that was assigned to their Union garrison?
And also, the fact that the Union soldiers were ready to leave the fort. They're like, okay, we're out of here.
That's when they got fired upon, was when they started trying to haul their own military equipment out of the fort. It's like, you guys keep the building, but who said you got the furniture? Where was this in the divorce?
This is a corporate restructuring, okay?
This is like a shitty divorce if both sides had guns.
You can keep the house, but I want the furniture.
Yep. Anyway, this new job that they get when the war starts is none other than being basically the CIA for the North during the Civil War. Now, the CIA and its predecessors do not exist. The U.S. does not have a major intelligence agency. So it relies on the nearest thing at hand. This private detective group that claims to be able to infiltrate criminal organizations at will.
Ah,
Yeah. Alan Pinkerton becomes chief of intelligence to a man named General McClellan, a man who, while not a particularly talented or innovative military officer, does get a worse rap than he deserves. Um, Partially on account of the fact that he is going up against some of the military minds of his generation, and partially on account of the fact that Alan Pinkerton is his head of intelligence. As Alan Pinkerton readily and repeatedly feeds him false or wildly inaccurate information on enemy troop counts, formations, and movements. Um, was Pinkerton a Confederate spy? You tell me, because he didn't like slavery, but at the same time, no one is that bad at their job unless they're doing it on purpose. This is like a man trying to get fired here.
jeez.
This all culminates in the 1862 Peninsula Campaign, where the Pinkertons are asked to give an estimate of the Confederate Army outside of Richmond, at which they report an army more than twice its size. Now, the actual numbers in comparison to McClellan's Union Army would give McClellan a clear advantage in the field of battle. However, McClellan believes he is vastly outnumbered. Like, the difference is instead of it being something like 3-2 in favor of McClellan believes it's 2-1 against him.
So my question is, because it's hard to count thousands of troops quickly and easily. Do you just think they kind of just guesstimated? They go, there were probably 40,000 troops.
I don't know. Suffice to say, they did not do their job
Because
at
that's a
all.
level of incompetence that even I think a willing bad actor would not
Yeah.
do that bad.
I have no
That's
idea
a
what's
high
going on.
level of incompetence to achieve,
But
even intentionally.
but this incident results in McClellan refusing to advance and making very panicked calls back to Washington for reinforcements against a force he should be able to crush. It is incidents like these, and I think, and I may be mistaken here, but I believe this incident in particular that results in McClellan's dismissal as a U.S. general, which was
Ooh.
kind of a blow to the North's war effort, as McClellan was popular on account of the fact that he was Irish and so was most of the army.
I can't imagine why that would be an interesting connection. Which I think it is also important to highlight. Like, one of the things that happened too that a lot of historians argue upon with McClellan is the fact that he was a really distinguished fighter during the Mexican American War, which is where he rose to prominence and rose in ranks. So he
Yeah,
was pretty much just assumed the position of commander of the Union forces at this point, or at least
yeah.
of a detachment of them.
Well,
And
no, he was made commander on account of the fact that Lee chose to side with his buddy Jackson, uh, and the South over the North. I believe Lee was offered the position over McClellan, but refused.
yeah, which Lee was like, if you're talking about military generals, he was top of the
Yeah, like
ranking.
yeah, and that's what I meant earlier when I said that McClellan's going up against the talent of his generation
Yeah.
in the form of Lee and Jackson. McClellan is a good soldier, but he is a conventional soldier. He is not an innovative soldier. He is not a military genius by any stretch of the imagination. He's good at his job, but he is sabotaged and he is facing the toughest opposition he could reasonably expect outside Napoleon.
Oh, God. Yeah. So just the cards stacked against him. But
Yeah.
I think it's important to highlight he was a successful soldier. He wasn't just this
Yeah.
incompetent.
He was not an incompetent. He just gets a very bad rap because of the basically because of Alan Pinkerton and Robert E. Lee. Like just those two forces combined to crush him, and it's the same in a lot of cases throughout history. A couple other things of note would be Magnus Pompey versus Julius Caesar. Magnus Pompey is a great general, but he's a conventionalist, and his army is all recruits. So he gets crushed by the innovative tactician that is Caesar, who is a generational talent. Even though, and Pompey in the Roman Civil Wars looks like an imbecile, but only because of who he's facing, not who he is. That's an important thing to distinguish. But we're not here to go any further into military history, because after the war, Pinkertons get out of the intelligence business just as fast as they got in and decide to specialize in train theft. Specifically, the 1866 Adams Express Co. theft. Now, train theft is the most profitable form of robbery and crime in the United States after the Civil War, which would really put a damper on things for a lot of companies, as they were shipping literal bags of cash on these trains in order to make banks solvent. Banks weren't backed by anything other than what was in their vaults. Therefore, in order to keep banks on the frontier solvent, you had to ship them large sums of cash, which they could then loan out and take in savings, etc., etc., etc.
And trains are notorious because, unlike certain vehicle types or wagons, you can't really change up your course.
Yeah, they follow a set path and speed.
And timing. So
Yep.
you kind of know where and when it's going to be.
Yeah, the bank carriage doesn't have to publish exactly when it's coming to town. Train does. And in 1866, the Adams Express Co. suffered a $700,000 Now that is 700,000 1866 US dollars. So basically you have Jeff Bezos money.
Oh my god.
It was stolen by the Reno Brothers of Indiana, not a car dealership.
Oh no.
The Reno Brothers were the first train robbing gang of America. They were the first ones to do it, and they did it well. Unfortunately for them, they're on this list because they're a Pinkerton success story. The Pinkertons did what they did best. They infiltrated the gang, walked around taking pictures of everyone, which apparently no one seemed to question.
So they basically invent the mugshot then, because they're just taking pictures of all the criminals.
They did. They invented the mugshot. They made a binder of everyone in the gang and posted it in the post office under the title Mugshots, with the complete collection being known as the Pinkerton Rogues Gallery.
That is a badass name. If we could end up on the Rogues Gallery, that's a pretty awesome target.
Stop having aspirations.
This is my villain arc.
Stop having.
I mean, we already lost Aaron to the Pinkerton, so
yes, he's not. He took one for the team.
We had a fall guy, and I looked it up. $700,000 in 1866 in modern day value is about $13.5 million.
Yeah.
So not a small sum by any means.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous. As we move forward with their train theft cases, they actually come to blows with none other than the famous gangster Jesse James.
Ooh.
As in 1874, the James gang performs a train robbery against, you guessed it, the Adams Express Company.
Oh my god, that poor train company just kept getting hit.
The Pinkertons just have are just on retainer for these guys, and for good reason.
We'll find out that they're on retainer for a lot of companies.
Yep. So Frank and Jesse James were responsible for the train robbery in 1874. In response, the Pinkertons sent a a man named Witcher to the James farm. Apparently, the Pinkertons hadn't learned the buddy system yet, as they sent him alone. He refused backup from law enforcement and repeatedly ignored warnings from law enforcement that, and I am quoting here, the bitch will kill you just as soon as her sons. In reference to Jesse James's mother, who very much raised her boys like she was.
Jesus.
Anyway, Witcher is found dead several days after declaring his intentions to head to the James farm and arrest the James brothers. In response, and this is another quote, Alan Pinkerton himself declared that they, meaning the James family, all must die. And in January of 1875, locked Jesse James's mother and his 8-year-old brother in the family farm and set it ablaze, burning them both alive. To accomplish this feat, he brought an armed mob.
Which I'm imagining the armed mob didn't go inside and check who was in there. They just barricaded the doors and torched the place.
I think he knew who was inside and killed them anyway.
Well, yeah, I don't think it mattered who was going to be inside.
I don't think it mattered to him.
I think to him, no matter who was inside, they were going to die.
Yeah, this was a lynch mob. He received no real repercussions for, essentially dousing up and igniting an 8-year-old. Pinkerton would take this repercussions are not for me attitude to a whole new step with his next business entrepreneurial activity here, anti-labor.
Oh, so anti-union work. Oh, we like union busting, don't
not even unions. Anti-labor.
Oh no.
He attacks unions and non-unions. He has 2 highlights with anti-labor activities. The second and more famous one is the Homestead Strike for Carnegie Steel, something which we talked about earlier this season in the Gilded Age. I do believe that was this season, right? Or was that last season?
That was last season that we did the Gilded Age.
Yeah, season 1. Yeah, season 1 finale was the Gilded Age. Yeah, that was
throwback.
That's a throwback there for you. Please do check out our other podcast if you're interested.
Yeah, we have a whole season's worth.
Yep. Yeah, the Carnegie Steel plant in Homestead, Pennsylvania went on strike. In response to this 1892 strike, the Pinkertons were sent in. And by sent in, 300 armed Pinkertons walked up to the line of striking workers, their wives, and their children, took out their guns, and opened fire.
There won't be a strike if there's nobody left to strike. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat.
However, these are American working class people in a company town in Pennsylvania. They are also armed, and they vastly outnumber the Pinkertons, which means that in short order, a gunfight breaks out that results in actually a pretty even battle, as 9 workers are gunned down, and they take 7 Pinkertons with them.
Wow.
The fight ends with the surrender of the remaining 293 Pinkertons, who are marched off the land with their weapons confiscated.
Oh, jeez.
In response to this, there was a major wave of actually pro-labor legislation, as 26 states banned the use of outside contractors during labor suppression. That's right. If you want to suppress a union or a labor revolt, you have to do it with your own personal security force. You cannot hire a third party.
Darn. There goes the Pinkertons' business model.
Yep.
Can't imagine what
Uh,
they would transition to afterwards.
well, yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because before we get to that transition, they have another famous anti-labor activity. One that is slightly racially motivated.
What could be racially motivated around this time
Uh,
period? It's not like we were talking
oh,
about the Irish or anything.
yeah, no, it's the Molly Maguires, which was an organization
Molly
of coal
Maguire.
miners, uh, predominantly Irish coal miners, who were suffering in the wake of the Civil War. A lot of them ex-soldiers and the like, who were met with the Irish need not apply racism because coming from the wrong isle in the British Isles means you're not human, apparently. Despite the fact that there was literally a whole war that was just fought for everyone is equal in the eyes of the law. What amazing how that works.
God.
Anyway, the, these people operated in West Virginia and Pennsylvania from 1862 to 1876.
Wow.
They did. They got started up with dissatisfied people being forced to work in wartime conditions. Then the post-war conditions were actually worse, despite winning the war. And well, the ball just kept rolling. Um, they named themselves after an Irish widow who led a bunch of Irish anti-landlord, shall we call them, agitators in the 1840s. So this is basically what's left of a rebellion against the British over in Ireland. This is where the people who survived that ended up.
Mm.
Uh, so much like Alan Pinkerton himself, coming to America after getting involved in anti-government politics over in the UK.
Crazy how that works out and that they all came to America.
Yep. Uh, the poor working conditions and internal discrimination against the Irish led to the Irish committing sabotage against the coal companies.
Yeah, I don't blame them. Good for them.
Yep. In response, the Pinkertons sent a man named James McParland
Oh,
to
that's an Irish
infiltrate the
name.
group. Yep, they found an Irishman working with them and sent him to go destroy the livelihoods of his former countrymen, which he did. Um, he he got 10 men hung from 1875 to 1877.
Jeez.
After which point, the public executions were enough to deter further activity. Especially given the fact that these were targeted public executions based around ringleaders, agitators, and anyone with enough charisma to rally folk.
Yeah, they usually go for the heads of the dissident groups when they go for those extreme punishments.
Yeah, they went for public hanging.
Ooh, so yeah, he ended up getting 10 men after that service, and,
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah. Now, the next thing that happens for the Pinkertons here is Alan Pinkerton does kick it. He kicks it in 1884, so 8 years before the incident at Homestead, which his sons apparently chose to use as a means of proving the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as the agency is inherited jointly by William and Robert Pinkerton, his children, uh, who, basically proceed to ensure that the company keeps carrying on.
And carry on it does. It
Oh,
continues to live on. I mean,
yeah.
they ended up shifting away from train theft towards security services, where they pretty much work predominantly within security services today. So,
Yeah, their official statement is that they exclusively work in security service. However, whatever Pinkerton defines as security service might not be the same as what
it's a little vague,
the
and we'll get
average
into
person does.
that.
Now we do get to come back to good things about the Pinkertons.
Rare.
Namely that in 1937 they officially suspended all anti-union operations. This was done under Robert Pinkerton II, Alan Pinkerton's great-grandson, who was the man who shifted the agency's operations towards security services, and he only did this 30 years after Theodore Roosevelt made all the trust-busting laws to basically make anti-union activity effectively illegal.
Oh, okay. So he only worked outside of the law for about 30 years.
Yeah, because keep in mind, Teddy Roosevelt is elected at the turn of the 20th century. And he is antitrust Teddy for a reason. He is also mentioned in our Gilded Age episode. Uh, we do come back to this era a lot.
And
Uh,
Teddy's a character in his own.
yeah.
That
Oh,
man was playing life as just an adventure game, and an adventure he made it.
yeah. Uh, the uh, the the next couple, shall we say, decades for the Pinkerton agency is very much a keep calm and carry on with a few uh, major highlights, splashes in the news here and there to keep with the origins of the Pinkertons, which is do something noteworthy even if you have to lie about it.
Oh, what else could they have lied about?
Well, they didn't lie about these things, but they did do the following. In 1962, they escorted the Mona Lisa across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, this was the first time the Mona Lisa had left Europe. So it was a big deal. This painting was considered and remains considered, but even more so at the time, basically the pinnacle of human art.
Yeah.
It's a masterwork by Leonardo da Vinci, who is often considered a penultimate artist, certainly the penultimate artist of the Renaissance. And this is his most famous work. Therefore, being associated with it in any way is a big PR boost.
Not to mention, the Mona Lisa had been on the move twice within recent memory by the time that this happened, because it was stolen in the turn of the century, only to be rediscovered a few years later. And during World War II, it was moved from its location and hidden because a certain invading army liked to borrow historic
Well,
artworks.
let's just say pre 1945 Germany had a habit of art collecting in in ways that would even make the Met shudder.
Yeah, and to this day, we still don't know where the Amber Room is.
We don't need to find that. That's just a treasure hunt.
It existed,
Anyway,
though.
in 1965, they adopt their more modern name of becoming Pinkertons Incorporated rather than the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. Apparently, they caught on 115 years later that 4 words is kind of a mouthful and doesn't print well on those little business cards you have to hand out.
No, no, no. They just went corporate. That's all.
Yeah.
Pinkerton Incorporated.
A small mammal with a hat goes flying at your office window. And that is as close to that reference as I'm going to get.
Yeah, we'll leave it there, but
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. They do. There are two other very key things that happen before the 21st century comes around, and that is they go international as they expand into Asia in 1969 with the addition of Pinkertons Incorporated Hong Kong. And with that, they become not just an American detective agency, but a global one, thanks to British control of Hong Kong at this time. I believe this is about when that deal was worked out, so the Pinkertons naturally moved in, and they use it as sort of a staging operations to interfere in places like the Philippines or Indonesia.
Or, around that same time, there might have
The,
been some conflict in Vietnam. We're not really
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, they're out of the intelligence business. Let's just say I believe their own website admitted to messing with Indonesia, which was not something that I would have expected them to have admitted to.
Their website, which,
Because,
for the record, if you go visit, is kind of interesting because it gives a very scrubbed and sanitized version of their history.
listen, it's okay. Listen. Last episode with Oliver Cromwell and your Scottish pride, it was amazing. Depending on what city the shall we say historical organization was based in, told you what Oliver Cromwell you got. The Oliver Cromwell Museum claimed he was a man who brought stability and civility unseen for over a decade to the United Kingdom. Everyone else said he was a monster. So, things like that. Anyway, their own website, I believe, admitted to Indonesia, which, given that they were doing things that would have got them sued and arrested in America in Indonesia, is kind of surprising. Um, anyway, the last big move that they make before we get into the 21st century is that Pinkerton Incorporated ceases to become simply an American-based international company and instead becomes a Swedish international corporation, as Pinkerton's is now a subsidiary of Securitas. That's right. You're not even your own masters. You answer to the IKEA people.
No. Oh no. What if they
Securitas and IKEA, I do not have any connection between these two companies other than nation of origin.
No. When you hire Securitas, they send you the security instruction packet, but weirdly enough, it arrives in flat pack form.
You have to assemble your own Pinkerton based on these steps.
That's the future of AI robot security Pinkerton agents.
Yeah, your Pinkerton security drone, it's made of wood and it comes in a box with 1,000 steps.
I don't want to be harassed at home by a robot Pinkerton.
A wooden robot Pinkerton, because keep in mind, this is IKEA. Almost all the furniture is made of wood.
Well, so now I'm just going to have to keep a gas canister nearby. We'll have a bonfire.
It's IKEA. If they can sell meatballs, they can sell you that too.
Hey, their meatballs are not bad. But yeah, talking about
Italian music as I slowly turn towards your screen.
Hey, Swedish meatballs, okay? That's the one thing Sweden's known for, besides cold. So the interesting thing, and what spurred this whole topic, is we plan our schedules out months in advance. Yeah. So we have a good idea of what's happening. This one kind of popped up out of the blue, and it was because of some persuasion. But basically, the Pinkertons are still in the news. They are still operating. They have an active website. And I don't know if you haven't heard of them before, but they were just in the news as of April because Hasbro and one of their subsidiaries, Wizards of the Coast, sent Pinkerton agents to a YouTuber's house because he had Magic the Gathering cards that he should not have had.
Yeah.
And
yes. 173 years of operation, and they're still kicking in the doors on people's homes.
Well, no. So this is where this really gets messed up in my mind, because what ended up happening was this guy bought the cards from a shop or from a retailer that were not supposed to be distributed. They were pre-release. So, of course, they had some concerns, and as a YouTuber, he made videos about them. Well, to Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, this was a huge leak, and what they did was they lied and said that they tried to communicate with the guy by calls, messages, and emails, and the YouTuber in question was like, no, I had not gotten any communications. The YouTuber's name is Dan Cannon, who runs a YouTube channel called Old School MTG, which is Magic the Gathering. And
hi, Dan. We're talking about you.
And basically, these Pinkerton agents tried showing up to this guy's house one day. He wasn't home, so they went door to door to his neighbor's house to gather as much information about him as they could. And then the next day, they knocked on the door. To his wife answering, they harassed her to the point where he came out and they were asking for him by full name, and basically got these pre-production cards, which that in itself is already extreme. The fact that Hasbro tried to send the Pinkertons, or actually sent the Pinkertons after this guy. But then even further is it came out that Wizards of the Coast had also hired the Pinkertons in 2019, or where a sheet of uncut holographic cards were taken out of one of their production facilities. And it's very interesting that this company has connections and have hired the Pinkertons a few times, but that's where I think it gets even more interesting, because some clever investigative journalists ended up discovering that Robin M. Klimek, who has been the director security risk management at Hasbro for 12 years, was previously director of supply chain security practice at Pinkerton, and the global management manager of wow, I really mixed that word. The current manager of global investigations is also a former Pinkerton agent. So they have infiltrated the toy marketplace.
Yeah.
And they are subcontracting out to their former employees.
Yep. The other thing where they've been in the news recently that is even more in line with the historical Pinkerton style. You remember how the Pinkertons swore off anti-union activities in 1937,
We are
approximately 30
officially no
years
longer
after it
union
became
busting.
illegal.
Yeah.
Yep. 30 years after it became illegal. Well, Amazon disagrees with that statement.
Yeah, Amazon
As,
ended up hiring the Pinkertons to union bust in some of their warehouses.
Yeah. Now, what they hired them to do was infiltrate the workers and watch for any signs of everyone not being North Korea style happy.
Yeah.
Which they did. And they proceeded to union bust.
You know,
Let's see. And I forget, was that this year or was that last year that they did that?
so this was actually 3 years ago now. This was in 2020.
Yes. Yes, their other 21st century exploit. Yeah, so they've kept coming up just enough where it's like, yeah, we should talk about these people probably.
Well, there's a couple that I actually have pulled up. So the Amazon one was interesting because they did that, and they did full on labor busting or union busting in Poland, which is kind of interesting. And or no, they've done union busting in the U.S., but in Poland they sent a team to investigate that job candidates were being coached for job interviews. So they sent them in to investigate that. But it doesn't just end there, because the Pinkertons are well and truly embedded in a lot of aspects. To my video game aficionados out there, the infamous Rockstar game Red Dead Redemption 2 famously hosts the Pinkertons and their exploits in the Wild West. And Pinkerton Consulting and Investigation actually took out a lawsuit against Red Dead Redemption 2 publisher Take-Two, in which they basically claimed copyright infringement, and they wanted royalties from the game, which is one of the best-selling game franchises in the world. So they were trying to get money for their company being used in the game, but Rockstar made the counter argument and the countersuit that it is within public history, that this is true, like, factual statements, that they're not infringing on any copyright, especially with it being historical, and that they cannot use trademark law to own the past, is the statement that their lawyers made. And that is, I think, one of the most badass quotes when going after the Pinkerton, or when trying to defend yourself from the Pinkerton agency. And then one other modern example that came up during my research was in Denver in 2020, in October of 2020. There were
Denver 2020. Was this like Becoming Human?
Basically. There were a lot of protests and demonstrations in downtown Denver, and 9 News hired Pinkerton agents to protect the journalists who were covering the protests. And according to the police narrative, a unlicensed subcontracted guard that Pinkerton had hired out fatally shot and killed a protester. And this became a huge ordeal because the guard was unlicensed, and then he was subcontracted through Pinkerton. And actually, it did lead to a change of law, by the way. Yet again, Pinkerton actions lead to change.
Yes. Pinkertons for a better future. We commit crimes so no one else will ever have to again. Yes. See, we're not anti-Pinkerton. Not entirely.
We say that until they're going to come knock on our doors. I mean, we've already
They are
lost
not going to come knock. what is with you people? You lobbied for this episode. We pushed it before the mid-season reshuffle, where we do our second half. We pushed this in front of all that. Wasn't even on the list. And as soon as we're on the air, like, oh, we're all gonna die horribly because of this. Like,
Look,
shit aside, do you want to go after these people or not? We are not that powerful.
this is a historic organization, so we were talking about the Pinkertons in their historic context.
Also,
However,
know every action they have ever taken in the past.
it's not been a good one for anyone involved. So, I'm just trying to brace myself. I think is probably the best.
We are not gonna come under threat. All right, that's too tasteless.
Oh God, and it's kind of interesting because this is fairly close to home. I mean, we're based out of Chicago, so having this agency as one of our
We do not.
local exports.
This agent, yeah, this agency is a local. It started off as a local agency, and it maintains offices here, in homage to its past and all that good stuff. But yeah, this has been the Pinkertons. I think we're at a good point to wrap up with yeah, the Pinkertons. And we're a historical company, which is why we start off with their historical name being Pinkerton National Detective Agency and not just Pinkertons Inc.
Yeah, we are not talking about the Pinkertons that are subsidiaries of Securitas.
Yes, you have for the last like 12, 20 minutes.
That is their modern context, and that is factual information that has come out.
Yep. We've done nothing wrong. You don't need to worry about them coming for you. Everything's fine. The world is the way it should be. Let's just move along and get to the next episode.
Yeah, on that terrible bombshell, if you guys enjoyed watching, please be sure to leave a like down below, share with your friends, help get the word out, help spread the love of the Pinkertons, and we will be back next week with an episode on...
Next week?
In 2 weeks, we're going to have our episode on Hammurabi.
Hammurabi is up. He would have been with you now, but... we pushed the Pinkertons in because, dear God, they can't stay out of the news.
Yeah, we figured to capitalize on modern events, but thank you for watching. We will see you next time.